I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when the phone started vibrating across the kitchen counter. 7:12 a.m. Ms. Finch, the voice said, breathless and urgent. This is Jeremy from Corporate Legal. I need to confirm something about the Westlake property. Why does your name appear as co-owner on the lease file? For a moment, I thought the caffeine had hit too hard. Then I looked out the window. From my apartment balcony in downtown Austin, I could see the mirrored glass of the Westlake hub across the river, my old office, my 9-year battlefield, and even from this distance, something was off. The security lights were flashing red. I'm sorry, I said evenly. Did you just say co-owner? Yes, ma'am. The system shows Westlake Holdings LLC as the primary leaseholder, but your name, your signature, is listed under controlling member. We need clarification immediately. I stirred my coffee. The smell of roasted beans filled the room, warm and grounding. Then I suggest you read the full document, I said, and ended the call. Outside, the morning traffic hummed across the river. People in suits crowded by the building's locked glass doors. Their badges blinked red, access denied. The same building where, less than 24 hours ago, I'd been told to return all property by noon, yesterday at 10:03 a.m. I sat in a beige conference room while my CEO, Miles Halbrook, watched me sign an exit form with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I wrote one word beside my signature, done. I remembered the click of the pen, the hush that followed, the metallic taste in my mouth as I handed over my badge. They expected tears. They expected begging. What they got instead was silence and a folder I never left behind. Now, one day later, the same people who erased my name couldn't even enter the building I had secured for them 3 years ago. My phone buzzed again. Another call from corporate. I ignored it. The coffee was cooling fast, and I hated cold coffee. By 7:20, the city was awake, the sky turning a pale pink over the skyline. I poured another cup, steady and unhurried, because this whatever was happening wasn't chaos to me. It was the sound of order returning. The Outlook notification had popped up without context. Urgent meeting, 10:00 a.m., no agenda, no explanation. Just that phrase every corporate veteran learns to dread, transition conversation. By 10:01, I was already sitting across from Cynthia from HR, her pastel cardigan as expressionless as her voice. Beside her stood a junior attorney pretending to check his notes, and against the far wall leaned Miles Halbrook, our CEO. He looked like an ad for expensive failure-polished shoes, perfect tie, and a smirk he must have rehearsed. Cynthia cleared her throat. Ilara, the company has decided to move in a new direction. Effective immediately. Your position as senior regional strategist is being concluded. Concluded, as if I were a sentence they could edit out. She kept speaking, something about returning company property by noon. Miles didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His presence was the punctuation mark, final and cold. I watched his reflection in the glass wall, arms crossed, waiting for me to crumble. Instead, I reached for the pen. You'll need to sign the transition form, Cynthia added. The paper was thin, cheap ironic, given the 9 years of revenue I'd brought in. I signed my name and wrote a single word beside it. Done. The room went quiet. I could feel Miles's gaze, searching for the weakness that wasn't there. He gave a small, satisfied nod, as if he'd won something. When they left, I sat alone for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then I began to pack. Not quickly, not dramatically. Every motion was deliberate. My mug, my framed photo, the notebook full of vendor notes that no one else had ever bothered to read. The last drawer was locked. My drawer. I slid the key from the chain around my neck and turned it once. Inside was a black leather folder, slim, unmarked. I lifted it out carefully, brushed off a layer of dust, and tucked it into my coat pocket. That folder had waited 3 years for this moment. By 10:46, my office was empty. I walked past Miles's glass corner suite without looking in. The air smelled like disinfectant and arrogance. In the elevator's mirrored wall, my reflection didn't look defeated. It looked ready. 3 years before the firing. The Westlake project had been hanging by a thread. I remember the night it almost died an empty office, the glow of a single desk lamp, and an email from the developer that began with, "We're moving on unless the lease is signed by Friday." It was Tuesday. Our legal department was paralyzed, chasing clauses and red lines like they were solving a crime instead of building a future. The regional expansion depended on that site 30,000 square feet, prime location near the tech corridor, the heart of everything Vantage promised its investors. I'd sent 4 urgent memos. No one answered. So I stopped asking. I called the developer myself. "If I can deliver a signed lease by end of day, will you hold the property?" He said yes, but only if the signature came from an entity with financial liability, no placeholders, no empty shells. That night, I created Westlake Holdings LLC using my cousin's accounting address and a single-member filing. 45 minutes later, the entity was active. I signed the lease through Westlake Holdings, faxed it back before midnight, and saved the project. The next morning, operations launched as if by magic. Miles, then a mid-level director, sent an email congratulating me for strategic initiative. I didn't bother correcting him. He got his promotion. I got a quiet satisfaction. The plan had always been temporary. Once legal caught up, they'd reassign the lease to Vantage. I even drafted the transfer memo and sent it to compliance for review. It sat there unread, flagged in yellow for months. Eventually, everyone forgot. Everyone but me. Over time, Westlake Holdings became more than a line on paper. Vendor contracts, maintenance services, parking agreements all flowed through that same LLC. It was cleaner, faster, efficient. And because the system worked, no one asked who was technically in charge. I never thought of it as a weapon. It was insurance, a structure that kept the lights on when bureaucracy couldn't. But as I looked at that black folder on my kitchen table now, the embossed seal still catching the morning light, I realized what it truly represented. It wasn't rebellion. It was survival written in ink. By the time the sun cleared the skyline, the city was already humming, but Westlake wasn't. At 8:02 a.m., my phone buzzed with a dozen missed calls and 3 texts from unknown numbers. The first was from Kelsey, my old assistant, Ilara. "No one can get in. All badges red, even Miles's." I opened the blinds. Across the river, the building shimmered under the morning light, its glass panels flashing red at every failed scan. Employees crowded the front plaza, their confusion visible even from my apartment window. The second call came from Chuck, head of the private security firm still under Westlake Holdings contract. "Morning, Ms. Finch," he said, casual as ever. "Just confirming we're maintaining lockdown until we hear from you directly." "That's right," I answered. "Copy that. Looks like the company tried to override the access control, but the system flagged it as unauthorized. Don't worry, we've got it stable." I thanked him, hung up, and sat back with my coffee. My hands were steady, but inside, something unfamiliar flickered, part awe, part disbelief. 9 years I'd spent building systems that never failed, not once. Now those same systems had turned obediently toward me, not out of vengeance, just logic, paperwork, signatures, and a forgotten clause doing what people refused to remember who kept them running. Another buzz, this one from an old vendor contact. "Karen, the coffee supplier. Ilara, we're locked out too. Want me to hold deliveries? Hold for 48 hours, I said. "I'll let you know when to resume." She laughed softly. Guess they finally learned who signs the checks. Somewhere inside that sealed glass tower. Miles was probably pacing, trying to reach anyone who could fix what wasn't broken. I pictured him dialing legal facilities, IT, each call ending the same way. "We can't override. It's not our lease." At 9:17, a new email arrived. Subject urgent, access containment strategy. The thread was a storm of panic, HR blaming it blaming facilities blaming legacy documentation. I read it once, then closed the laptop. The building could wait. For the first time in years, I didn't have to fix anyone's crisis. I had simply become the crisis. By mid-afternoon, the chaos had gone quiet. The company stopped calling. Even the legal department went silent until a new message arrived in my inbox. From Miles Halbrook, subject coffee. Let's clear the air. He picked a small cafe downtown, the kind with glass walls and polite jazz meant to hide bad intentions. When I arrived, he was already seated by the window, sleeves rolled, pretending to be casual. The man looked exhausted, jaw tight, tie loosened, eyes rimmed red from a night of failed damage control. "Ilara," he said, standing halfway. "Appreciate you coming. No hard feelings." "Right." I sat opposite him, resting my bag on the chair beside me. The table between us smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and desperation. He wasted no time. From his briefcase, he slid a sealed manila envelope toward me. "This is a gesture of goodwill," he said. "A one-time payment for your contributions. Let's just call it closure." I didn't touch it. "Closure," I repeated softly. "It's generous," he added, smiling too wide. "6 figures, pre-tax." Outside, a bus rolled by, its reflection slicing his face in two. I could hear the strain in his voice, the thin thread of panic he was trying to mask with charm. Before I could answer, a calm voice interrupted. "Apologies for being late." Diane Kaplan, my attorney, slid into the seat beside me. Gray blazer, hair pinned in a sharp knot, presence steady as stone. Miles froze. "Mr. Halbrook," she said, flipping open a leather folder. "We've reviewed the Westlake lease. Section 4, Paragraph 9. Termination or reassignment requires written notice and 6 months of rent at prevailing market rate plus a 22% administrative penalty." Miles blinked. "I wasn't aware of that clause." "That's because you never read it," I said quietly. He leaned back, face paling, his confidence deflating in real time. Diane closed the folder. "Your offer doesn't even cover the penalty, let alone the lease value." Silence settled like dust. I stood, sliding my chair neatly into place. "Next time," I said, "bring numbers that belong in the same building." And then I walked out, leaving the envelope unopened on the table. The next morning, the silence broke like glass. At 8:03 a.m., a confidential memo leaked into a company-wide thread titled "Urgent Westlake Ownership Clarification." Within minutes, it was everywhere copied, screenshotted, whispered about in Slack channels and hallway group chats. Someone had forwarded it to me from an anonymous address called Truth Sprinkle Reproton Mail, COM. The memo was 6 pages of panic dressed in legal phrasing. It admitted what they'd all ignored: the Westlake Hub's lease, vendor contracts, and operational access were registered under Westlake Holdings LLC, with me as the sole managing member. Control of utilities, security, and maintenance sat squarely in my name. The summary line was almost poetic in its bureaucratic horror: corporate exposure risk high. I set my coffee down and read it twice. Slowly, for once. The truth didn't need my voice, it had found its own. By 9 hours, 0 messages started flooding in from people I hadn't heard from in months. "Ilara, is it true HR just held an emergency meeting? Someone said Miles is in trouble. He was..." A follow-up email landed in my inbox around 9:17 a.m. from Ruth Caldwell, a senior board member who used to hover 10 floors above the rest of us. "Ms. Finch, we've become aware of significant documentation discrepancies regarding the Westlake site. Please confirm a time to discuss your involvement in the initial acquisition." I didn't reply. Not yet. By noon, an internal announcement went out. Effective immediately, Mr. Miles Halbrook will be stepping back from his role as CEO pending internal review. The statement thanked him for his leadership during transitional challenges. It didn't mention the lease, or the missing signatures, or the email thread he'd ignored 3 years ago, the one where I had clearly outlined the ownership structure and requested reassignment. That thread resurfaced too. Screenshots of it made their way into the memo's appendix. My name and timestamp intact. The final line from Miles's reply was the same one I'd memorized years ago. "Looks good. Signing now." The irony was almost kind. He had signed away control before he even knew what it meant. As I scrolled through the chaos unfolding in real time, I felt no glee, no urge to gloat, just a steady quiet like a storm, finally recognizing where it started. The call came the next morning, crisp and deliberate. "Ms. Finch, this is Bridget Langley, Executive Vice President of Corporate Strategy. I'd like to discuss a resolution." Her tone carried none of Miles's arrogance, just fatigue and precision. The voice of someone brought in to clean a mess she hadn't made. I agreed to a call at noon. No video. Just voices. When it connected, she didn't waste time. "Vantage recognizes that Westlake Holdings maintains operational and contractual control of the site. We'd like to acquire full ownership immediately." What would make that happen quickly? It was almost refreshing, no flattery, no false warmth, just the quiet sound of surrender dressed in professionalism. I flipped through my notes, the terms already outlined in my own handwriting. "I'll make this simple." I said, 4 conditions. Bridget exhaled softly, pen ready. 1, I continued, a complete acquisition of Westlake Holdings, including all rights and assets attached to it. Understood. 2, compensation equivalent to 3 years of executive-level performance bonuses, indexed to regional growth metrics. I'll provide the documentation. Another pause. I heard the scratch of her pen. Continue. 3, I said, a formal, board-signed statement acknowledging my role in founding and structuring the Westlake expansion. That letter must become part of the permanent record. And 4, she asked, an optional 60-day consulting retainer. At my discretion. If you need transitional guidance, you'll have it. If not, it expires quietly. For the first time. Bridget hesitated. Then she said, "Understood. You'll receive a draft agreement by end of day." Her composure impressed me. There was no defensiveness, no attempt to minimize what happened, just the efficiency of someone who knew the cost of delay. "Bridget," I said before hanging up, "this isn't about revenge. It's about accuracy. I figured as much." She replied, "Accuracy tends to be expensive." The line clicked off. I leaned back in my chair, the city noise faint against the glass. It struck me how calm it all felt now. The fear, the humiliation, the anger had burned away, leaving only clarity. For years, I'd been told to stay in my lane. Now, the lane was mine and they were asking permission to merge. The transfer cleared at 10:47 a.m. I saw it appear on the banking screen, 6 figures, clean and final. The cursor blinked beside the confirmation code. Steady and silent. For a moment. I just stared. After everything, the meetings, the humiliation, the emails ignored, justice had arrived without ceremony. Just a few digits and a timestamp. Diane sat across from me in the small conference room, scrolling through her copy of the agreement. Her calm was absolute. "Funds confirmed," she said. "They moved fast. They had to." I answered. A knock interrupted us. A courier in a tan blazer stepped in, holding a black envelope sealed with the company's insignia. He looked nervous, like he'd walked into the aftermath of something he didn't understand. I signed for it, thanked him, and waited until the door shut before opening it. Inside were 2 documents, the official acquisition statement and the board's acknowledgement letter. The first line read, "We recognize Alara Finch as the foundational architect of the Vantage Westlake Hub. Her strategic leadership and decisive action during the 20XX expansion were essential to the company's success." The words were plain, printed in corporate font, but they landed heavier than any apology. I ran a thumb over my name at the bottom, embossed into the paper. No titles, no flowery language, just a record that couldn't be erased. Diane leaned forward, glancing over the letter. "You got exactly what you asked for," she said. "Almost," I replied. I folded the documents carefully, placed them back into the envelope, and slid it into my bag beside the black leather folder that had started it all. It felt lighter now, like a chapter closing on itself. Outside, the air was bright and cold. The city moved as if nothing monumental had happened. Buses humming, sunlight bouncing off the glass towers. Somewhere across the river, the Westlake hub was alive again. Lights on, doors open, workers back at their desks. I didn't feel victorious. Just even... For years, I'd been the invisible scaffolding holding everything upright. Now, finally, the blueprint had my name on it. 2 weeks later, Austin had settled back into its rhythm. The river shimmered under the afternoon sun, and the Westlake hub stood spotless again like the chaos had never happened. From the pedestrian bridge, I could see new security staff at the doors, the revolving glass panels turning smoothly. I crossed over, more out of curiosity than nostalgia. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and sanitizer. Inside the lobby, everything gleamed, the floors polished, the front desk staffed with unfamiliar faces. A new banner hung behind the reception counter, draped in the company's colors. Build like someone will inherit your legacy tomorrow. My words. 3 years ago, I'd written them in a planning memo for an internal campaign. No one had signed it then. Now it was printed 10 feet tall, neatly centered, and attributed to no one at all. I stood for a moment, watching an employee take a photo of it on her phone. She smiled, probably thinking it came from some leadership consultant or branding firm. I didn't feel anger. Not anymore. They hadn't stolen it, they'd just paid for the right to pretend it was theirs. Miles was gone, quietly replaced by an interim executive. HR avoided the word fired, preferring transitioned. The board had issued their internal announcement, then moved on to quarterly projections. For them, the story was over. For me, it had simply rewritten itself. Outside, I stopped by the small cafe across the street, the same one where Miles had once tried to buy me off. The barista recognized me from before and slid a coffee across the counter without asking my order. "On the house," she said. I smiled, left a tip, and sat by the window facing the building. A security guard I didn't know stood near the entrance, posture crisp in the early heat. I thought of Chuck and his crew, the ones who had followed protocol to the letter, who kept their word when others didn't. That night, I mailed a donation to the Guard Association Fund quietly, without a signature, as the afternoon light stretched across the street. The banner inside caught the reflection of the sun. The words glowed for a moment before fading back into glass. I took one last look, then walked away.